Recently, I booted up the old PlayStation and enjoyed the Shadow of the Colossus remake developed by Bluepoint. This is the first time I'd returned to the game since the PlayStation 2 in its 20 frames per second glory. However, while greeted by stunning visuals and captivating colossi, I couldn't shake this weird and odd feeling. For some reason, it didn't feel like the game I played as a kid. Sure, every aspect of the original was improved with this remake, from performance to gameplay, but as I continued playing, I found it to be something else. Was the game different, or was I? Well, in truth, it couldn't be me. I'm still the same child at heart, pounding Code Red and pizza Lunchables. As I continued to play, the more I realized something odd about the game. That after all of these years, it no longer felt like Shadow of the Colossus. Rather, it felt like a modern Zelda game, namely Breath of the Wild and its sequel, Tears of the Kingdom. Surely I was just tripping. Too much Zelda, Code Red, and childish ball jokes had turned me insane, right? Well, as I continued to climb and kill Colossi, I was unable to shake the comparison, half expecting my weapons to break as I turned the corner to find a blood moon and a shrine puzzle. On the surface, you can see the similarities. You play as a boy within a fantasy setting, ride a trusty mount, fight to save a damsel princess, all while conquering dungeons and puzzles. Pretty basic stuff, right? Well, there's actually more. You still have the divine beast and scattered shrines that litter the breathtaking maps. Plus, they both feature demons. Then you have bomb arrows, weird liquid from enemies, wise elder men, and so on. You see, there is this weird atmosphere that radiates from the games, a similar feeling modern Zeldas and Shadow both invoke. The games feel similar when playing due to the focus on diverse biomes and the odd architecture. But even more, they all use silence while exploring the environment, drawing you deeper into the scenery and creating a serene experience. Combining all these elements with certain mechanics, such as a grip meter, and it became hard to ignore the similarities as if burnt into my retina. Plus, I had similar feelings when I played Breath of the Wild for the first time. It felt like a mix of Twilight Princess, Shadow of the Colossus, and science. At this point, I realized I wasn't crazy. Take that, court-ordered psychologist. I knew there had to be a connection of some kind. Well, it turns out there is. You see, after doing some internet detective work, and by that I just mean Googling stuff, not only do the games share some of the same DNA, but they also share the same inspirations. They both draw from the Japanese animated Studio Ghibli films and the masterful work of Miyazaki. Their shared love of the films links them, as still to this day, aspects of their work are direct callbacks and homages to the films. Does Link's Stinkfist look familiar? However, the link between these games goes deeper than a shared love and common ancestor. Pulling back the curtain, you can actually find references that name Shadow of the Colossus as a direct inspiration for Breath of the Wild. I mean, wiki pages never lie. But before Zelda enthusiasts get angry, let me just highlight this video isn't a evil Nintendo stole indie games work. I am not trying to highlight or spotlight a gaming injustice. This isn't a sword measuring contest either to see which franchise is bigger or better. In my opinion, being inspired by something isn't a crime, plus the games have plenty of aspects that make their titles unique and amazing in their own right and on their own merits. Shadow of the Colossus focuses on the tranquil beauty of its environment. There are no minions, levels, chests, loot, rupees, armor types, weapon types, damage values, or quest-giving NPCs. Shadow is rather simple. There are 16 bosses, some fruit and lizards, a handful of coins, and a horse that is the spawn of hell. The game doesn't bog you down in menus, level up screens, or send you on random side mission errands. Your goal is to traverse the tranquil world and find the bosses. There is nothing but the devastating and daunting task at hand. I've personally never seen a game do so much with so little. The game is a glorified art house boss rush mode. While both Zelda and Shadow have puzzles, their implementation is quite different. In Shadow, the colossi are the actual puzzles. Most require you to locate their weaknesses and how to exploit them before getting curb stomped into a mushy man cake, Gray Fox style. Modern Zelda, though, is a game built on player engagement and experimentation, giving the player massive agency on how they can fight, explore, and solve puzzles. It forces you to think about movement, spatial awareness, and invites players to experiment with its systems and mechanics. Where else can you bend the laws of physics and build dick rockets and yeet yourself across the game map? Shadow says, nah, this is how you move, this is how it's done, and you're going to like it. It's a structured game that is telling a story through gameplay and very little actual spoken word. It reminds me more of FromSoft style directing and storytelling, just with less character options. Again, Shadow only features 16 enemies, with the hardest one being the horse controls. I yelled "just go straight" more than a conservative parent. The thematic tones, while similar when exploring, are also different by credits end. Despite the beautiful landscape, Shadow of the Colossus is haunting, empty, and drab. It's as if the saturation and sound of the world left with the life of your former love. It somehow balances this melancholy with a world that is still inviting. Modern Zelda can feel just the same, showing the aftermath of a world you left behind, but it can also infuse these areas with life, showcasing a world with a heart that still beats. Then comes our protagonist. While Link is the stereotypical villager who rises to be a hero, the nameless protagonist of Shadow is the opposite. His selfish desires to resurrect his beloved put him in opposition with the village as he strikes a deal with a taboo evil. While on the surface he appears to be a stereotypical fantasy hero, this selfish desperation aligns him closer to a character like Joel from The Last of Us than it does Link. To me, all these differences highlight how things can be inspired from the same thing and even each other, yet can still be original and beautiful in their own right. Personally, I found it amazing to see how this inspiration cycle has actually come full circle. You see, some of the developers are actually friends. This shared love and friendship would also serve as a link between the two worlds. Fumito Ueda, the creator of Shadow, has stated that when he set out to make Shadow of the Colossus, he actually in fact tried to make his own Zelda game. So, in a whimsical twist of fate, Shadow is actually inspired by past Zelda games. That means after trying to create his own Zelda, he ended up creating something that the Zelda franchise itself would use as an inspiration. That is a full circle moment. Zelda in turn has made some of the best games of the past decade, inspired other studios to make great games, and created legions of new Zelda fans. It's this long thread of great games that in a weird way combines multiple fandoms and spans decades. This isn't new. Plenty of great games draw inspirations from similar sources or titles. However, unlike some games of yesteryear that have aged like milk, I still think Shadow of the Colossus holds up to this day. Granted, the remake helps, but I still think that its unique gameplay loop and cinematic elements are quite timeless. They are still captivating for streams and modern gamers. Sure, it doesn't feature loot boxes, NFTs, multiplayer, or cosmetics, but if you like modern Zelda or other contemporary games, in my eyes, you should love Shadow. Elden Ring, Monster Hunter, Dragon's Dogma, Zelda, all of these games have similar aspects to Shadow of the Colossus, and I personally feel that despite its odd design, it can still proudly hold up beside these modern games. As it stands, Shadow of the Colossus serves as a reminder of when games were made with passion, love, and vision. We all know that if Shadow was made today, it would be accused of being a Zelda clone, which granted isn't a bad thing. However, it could also be infused with meaningless side content, overpriced DLC, cosmetic microtransactions, and a Colossus expansion battle pass. Thank God EA or Blizzard wasn't in charge of the remake. Shadow, for me, has always been a game that felt unique, even on the PlayStation 2. That when people suggest that video games aren't art and is instead a waste of time, Shadow of the Colossus is one of the games I use to combat their stupidity. Not every game is trying to eat quarters at the arcade or drain your credit card for skins. Some games are art. What I hope is that modern gamers and newer Zelda fans can see this and give Shadow of the Colossus a try. It's offered on PlayStation Plus, so if you're like me and download games just to let them slowly age still unplayed, I think it's finally time to give it a try. Similar games, and especially Zelda, is in an all-time high right now, with gamers even voting it as one of the best games of all time. That if Breath of the Wild was your first Zelda game, I suggest you go back and play the previous ones and Shadow while you're at it. After the release of The Last Guardian, we are still awaiting Ueda's next game. Who knows? Maybe he is taking inspiration for his next title from a unique place. It would be fitting, don't you think? Until then, we can play his masterpiece Shadow of the Colossus and the wonderful Zelda titles that it helped inspire. So, did you like the video? Me neither. Still try subscribing though, because it tickles me where your mom doesn't. And just in case you forgot, Argo is the devil. Have a good one.